An Intro to Assemblies of God Missions by Amanda Critchfield. First, we will be discussing a few missiological terms necessary in discussing missions history. Next, we will learn about the modern missions movement and history, including the Assemblies of God. Lastly, we will discuss current missions trends and projections for future missions work. A common term used when discussing missions is the Latin term Missio Dei. The direct translation of Missio Dei is simply God's mission. God's mission is to bless all the nations through his people, the church. God's plan to fill the earth with his glory began at creation when he commanded Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. He reaffirmed his plan to bless all nations with his covenant to Abraham. Jesus further demonstrated God's plan to save all people with the Great Commission in Matthew 28, when he commanded his disciples to make disciples of all nations. In Revelation chapter 7, we see that every tribe, tongue, and nation will worship God. God's mission invites us, his church, to be part of blessing the nations by proclaiming and demonstrating the good news of Jesus Christ. Other common terms used in defining missions are mission, missional, and missions. Mission, without an S, is that Missio Dei, the total work of God through his church to redeem the world. Missional is an adjective that describes the activity of the church in accomplishing the mission of God. Missions with an S, however, is a particular activity. Missions is establishing the church where it does not exist. Missionaries are those that are planting the church. Matthew 28:19, Jesus said to go and make disciples of all nations. The Greek word for nations is ethne, meaning people group. The peoples of the world can be divided into 4 categories. The first category is a frontier peoples group. These distinct ethno-linguistic people groups have less than 0.1 Christians. Unreached people groups have less than 2% Christians. Culturally near non-believers are those that do not follow Jesus, but do have a significant population of Christians within their ethno-linguistic group. Christians are those that follow Jesus, who are tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that the remaining people groups have access to the gospel and to believers within their own people group. This is where missions and missionaries come in. They take the gospel across cultural lines so that every people group has a community of believers to continue reaching their own. Missions in the modern era. The modern era of missions began in 1792 when William Carey, the father of modern missions, moved from England to India. The era of beachhead missions, also known as the Great Century of missions, was characterized by Western missionaries planting churches and missions bases along coastal cities in Asia and Africa. The era of frontier missions saw a greater emphasis on the interior parts of countries. Ministries like the Inland China Mission began to contextualize the gospel for people groups further from the coast. In 1934, there began an emphasis on unreached people groups, the distinct ethno-linguistic people groups of the world who had yet to receive the gospel in their own language. There was an increased effort to translate the Bible into all languages. In recent years, it is important to note not just where or to whom the gospel is spreading, but by whom is the gospel spreading. There is a rise in non-Western missionaries being sent to the ends of the earth. In the 19th century, 2 missionaries, Henry Venn and Rufus Anderson, developed a 3-pronged goal for indigenous churches in reaching maturity: self-governing, self-supporting, and self-propagating. As missionaries established churches, the goal would be for the churches to be appointing leaders and governing their own activities, supporting themselves financially without the support from the missionaries, and to be evangelizing and planting churches within their own region. Now we will look specifically at the history of AG missions. The Assemblies of God was formed in 1914, and the men and women there committed themselves to the greatest evangelization the world had ever seen. In the years following, the Foreign Missions Department of the AG became a more united effort. Missionaries were more carefully selected and prepared for the missions field. In 1959, the Foreign Missions Department was given more leadership, authority, and infrastructure to carry out mission strategies. There was a greater emphasis on church planting, training national church leaders through Bible colleges, and area directors were established over geographic regions. From 1990 to 2000, the worldwide adherence of the Assemblies of God nearly doubled. Missionaries were sent to the Eastern Bloc of Europe and to the 1040 window from West Africa to Asia. The Foreign Missions Department changed its name to the Assemblies of God World Missions. Missions in the present age. The Assemblies of God World Missions has committed itself to reaching, planting, training, and touching the people of the world. Reaching refers to proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. Planting refers to establishing churches. Training refers to developing national leaders and missionaries. And touching refers to meeting the needs of communities. Currently, about 33% of the world is Christian. About 38% of the world are non-believers but live near other believers, and 29% of the world are unreached by the gospel. Most of the remaining unreached people groups live in India, Muslim-majority countries, and Asia. However, only 3% of cross-cultural missions workers go to unreached people groups. Two worldwide trends are shaping current and future missions. The first is Pentecostalism. Presently, 25% of Christians are Pentecostal. The explosive growth in the last 100 years cannot be ignored. The second is globalization. We are living in an increasingly interconnected world due to advancements in technology and travel. The center of Christianity has moved from the global north to the global south. The face of Christianity is changing, and the face of its missionaries as well. Thanks for listening. The evangelization of this world is within grasp. In the words of Samuel Mills, we can do this if we will.